Hello, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, where we're still following our fictional Elvis fan, Joyce, as she continues to try to solve the mystery of August 16th, 1977. And if you've been following the last few episodes, you know that it's been a lot about the book, Elvis, What Happened? As we have just seen a press conference that was given by Sonny West and Dave Hebler. Terry, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate that you're here. And so, Joyce, today is August 17th, 1977. Exactly 48 years ago today in real time. And Joyce has been reading the papers in the morning to try to learn what's happened. She's been entering some information into her notebook, but right now she's kind of overwhelmed, hasn't been able to catch up to that notebook in a little bit, which has really just been a few hours. And that's because her friends came over. They showed her some pictures that were of prescriptions that Elvis was taking that had been prescribed by Dr. Nick, and they tried to understand together why Elvis would take these items and what the purpose could be. And we kind of got to the conclusion that he's in a lot of pain. He's probably in fair to middling pain all the time at this point in his life by 1977, if not severe pain. Hi, Angel. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you being here. So, we've learned that Elvis did have significant medical conditions. He had a liver biopsy, so he believed something was wrong. The biopsy came back with inconclusive results, and he was told maybe you just need to lose weight. So they were trying to figure out what was wrong with him, and that was a very painful thing for him to agree to go through. So he definitely was feeling something. Now, was he also recreationally using the drugs on top of that? Well, that's what Sonny and Dave are saying. Of course, they were terminated in 1976, so they haven't really been around for a year. And during that year, they wrote this book, Elvis, What Happened? They spent quite a bit of time doing it, and we're going to get into an article today that tells us all the specifics, like the amount of time that they did this and how much they got paid and how many books were printed. And we did look at this article a little bit in a previous episode, but I'm going to go ahead and redo the whole thing so that it all fits into this one episode, so that anybody who's coming in fresh on this particular episode, they'll be able to follow along easily and see what we're talking about. Hi, Marion. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate having you here. Hi, Regina. Good to see you too. Appreciate having you here. So I'm going to start off with this picture that you can see. And this is Elvis, Sonny West, and Joe Esposito on March 11th, 1974. So this is a little over 3 years before Elvis passed away. And they're leaving a hotel for the Hampton Roads concert. So Elvis is all dressed. He's ready to go to the show. Sonny's leading the way as bodyguard, making sure that everything is safe. And you can see Joe's back there with an expression on his face. I'm not sure what the expression is. So this was a happier time between all of them, I believe. And the trust still existed between Elvis and Sonny here. And you can see it in this picture. The other thing I think you could see in this picture is that while Elvis did struggle with his weight, he wasn't the only person struggling with his weight at this point in his life. And that's reflected by a couple of these guys around him. So obviously, everybody was eating well, and Elvis was included in that. And so when you see all these terrible shots at him being fat, these are his peers, and they're going through the exact same body kind of changes, just like everybody else did. So, but Elvis is the only one in the costume, in the jumpsuit. He's the only one that's going to get up on stage and perform. So he does have an image, and that image is, he's crucified on that image mercilessly by the media every moment of his life. Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you here. So that's the picture. And now we can get into the actual article for today. And while I'm reading it, I don't really have anything to show for the article. We did see a little bit of we have footage from Elvis's funeral procession. And we're going to watch that. It doesn't actually have any narration over it. So I'm just putting it on silent. It'll run in the background. And this is what's actually happening on this day. Now, the article I'm reading to you actually came out the next morning. It was printed in the Washington Post Thursday morning, probably. Yeah, for sure, Thursday morning. But Joyce has an amazing news agent who was able to get this from Washington early for us to be able to read on this day, while actually, I'm confused about that. The day that this is published is the day that we're looking at in the video. It's the day of the funeral procession. So hopefully I didn't confuse anybody too much on that, because I confused myself. We just look through the comments here. And thank you, everybody, for having a community over here in the comments and socializing a little bit, getting to know each other. I really do want everybody to feel like they're part of a community here. Everybody's opinion matters, so if you have something to say as this goes through, you don't agree with something I'm saying, or you want to agree, feel free to put it into the comments. So let me start up this video. So we should be able to see now the funeral procession as all of the limos leave from Graceland to begin to go to the graveyard. So we are flipping ahead just slightly in the timeline. We're going to end up coming back to the 17th because we still got a lot more to read about it. But I kind of want to finish this thread out about the book, Elvis, What Happened, so we can kind of get it behind us. Okay. And this article is titled "The Rush to Get Elvis Presley Books into Print." And so this is all about how people are trying to capitalize off of this, and they're printing this just 2 days after Elvis has passed away. It's already obvious to the people writing this article that people are trying to take advantage of Elvis and make some money off it. Thank you, Terry, for letting me know that you can see it. I appreciate that. And this is by Tom Zito and Larry Rotter. And it says, last August, National Star reporter Steve Dunleavy heard that Elvis Presley had fired 3 of his bodyguards. Dunleavy, now with the New York Post and author of its recent Son of Sam, Please Surrender letter, sought out the 3, questioned them about the torrid side of Elvis's private life, and wrote a book, Elvis, What Happened. So I did talk about this part in a previous episode, and I'll just hit the highlights here, that Steve has already parlayed his writing of this book into a new job at the New York Post, which is a substantially better newspaper than the National Star, which is a tabloid, much like the National Enquirer, or anything that you would read that you would not believe, because that's what a tabloid is. However, the tabloids are loving this particular story because Elvis, his real events through his death, have provided enough real events to continue to print. People are buying the papers. They don't even have to make anything up at this point. They just have to print what's really happened. And then the book, with an initial printing of 400,000 copies, was published with little notices or fanfare on August 1st. So the book's been out for 16 days as of the time that Elvis passes away. But within 6 hours of Presley's death on Tuesday, Ballantine Books had presses on Long Island spinning out an additional 250,000 copies, which the company expects to have in stores by the weekend. So as the events that you're seeing here on the television unfold, Ballantine Books is printing more copies of this book, Elvis, What Happened, because we have to assume most of the 400,000 are gone. They're at least gone from Ballantyne's warehouses, and that's what they count as sales. They don't really have to move off of the shelves. They just have to move out of the warehouse. So they need to get more orders ready because they've already received more orders. Now, I'll also mention that this television that we're watching, it was available in 1977. It's not maybe as iconic a model as the one we've been watching, but this was kind of a new one, and I think it looks a little bit like Space 1999, which was playing at the time. So I'd be interested to know if any of you had a television that looked like this. But to get back to the article, the three bodyguard, well, frankly, said, this is a quote from Ron Bush, the Ballantyne president. Frankly, I really don't know exactly how many we've sold so far. We've really been swamped with orders. So the president of the company would have us believe that he doesn't know how many books need to be. It's a ridiculous statement that I don't think we can believe. This is a publicity line that he has put out there. The three bodyguards held a press conference in Beverly Hills yesterday afternoon to tell the public that they aren't bloodsuckers trying to capitalize on the death of Elvis Presley. They said their book was written long before his death. So they were bloodsuckers trying to capitalize on the death. They were trying to capitalize on his life because he was going to be alive when they printed the book, but they were going to capitalize on something. And this particular article picks up on something that I talked about when we watched the actual event. And it's that Dave Hebler told reporters, quote, Elvis was a tormented man. He was a victim of himself, the image of the legend. And I talked about how Elvis was a tormented man, but it was Dave who was tormenting him, as well as Sonny and Red, because they all knew, they've made it clear that Elvis knew that the book was being published. And they've said he wasn't fighting it, but then they were holding up a paper that said he was fighting it. So they know all about this situation. There's nothing's being hid from them in this. He was being tormented, but it wasn't himself that was tormenting him. It was these three. But what's great about this article is they again call him Davis and have again gotten his name wrong. It should be David or Dave. And Marion's saying that, I'm not sure about Sonny and Red, but Dave seems to have no regrets about the book. They betrayed his love when he was alive. And that's kind of the point that they tried to make, is that they believed he would be alive. But I don't see what they did as being any better, whether he was alive or whether he was dead. It was still a betrayal. And so again, not trying to say that any of these people were bad people. Not trying to say any of them were good people. Trying to say that they made terrible choices in this instance. These were bad things that they did, and they reaped bad things from them. And we're going to hear about some of that here. And the book reportedly culled from 300 hours of taped interviews with the bodyguards alleges that Presley hoarded firearms, thought he was a prophet, was morbidly fascinated with corpses, tried to put a contract out on the man who Presley felt stole his wife Priscilla, and led a Howard Hughes-esque life of seclusion and took a wide variety of drugs. So there's a massive amount of stuff within that paragraph, but the most important part is the 300 hours of taped interviews, which this portion that they talk about is the smallest portion. And we know that because the book is very small. So we know that the book is very small, and all of that was the bad stuff, whatever was the worst. So they had a few sweet stories, but what's in the rest of this 300 hours? You just really gotta wonder. And then Dr. Jerry Francisco is quoted as saying, I can't say he was taking no drugs at all. His own doctor has said he was taking appetite depressants. There was no evidence of any abnormal, illegal drug use. So again, they're quoting Jerry, the Shelby County medical examiner, and he's again stating that there were no drugs, but they've twisted it around a little bit to try to make it sound like maybe there was. And Emma's saying that she agrees with Marion and that Dave has never or will never show any regret for his part in the book, and he's a terrible man in Emma's opinion, and he might be. So, I'm not making a statement one way or the other for myself because I want everybody to make their own opinions, but feel free to throw them into the comments. As long as there's no vulgarity, everything's allowed. We should all be able to express our opinions here. And I think Dave has never regretted what he's done. I would totally agree with that. And Angel saying they were like Judas, in my opinion. I agree that they were like Judas, but they may have also been somewhat like Peter. I'm not going to really compare them to either one, because then that would be to compare Elvis himself to Jesus, and he was not Jesus, and he said that many times. But there is certain similarities within the story, but there's a lot of Cain and Abel in it too. So, there's a whole bunch of Bible stories that really connect right to what happened here, and that show why Elvis went to that book to try to find wisdom, because it does apply to everyone's life, even right now. So, back to the article here. Asked about allegations in the book that Presley was on pills all day and could give himself shots in the arm or leg with these little plastic syringes, which is what Sonny was saying the day before, the day Elvis died, during an interview with Bob Green. He said this thing about the little plastic syringes. Dr. Francisco, the Shelby County medical examiner, says, it would seem to me, as a professional, that if the use was that frequent, that severe, we would have found some evidence during examination. Not finding them, I can't give credibility to those statements. So, Dr. Francisco saying, whatever they saw him doing with these plastic syringes, he hadn't been doing it a long time, because he's not finding any indication, any scars of that. So he couldn't have been doing it all that much to start with, because that would leave some kind of permanent scarring. And then for some reason, they've asked the Ballantine book president about what's happened, after Elvis's death, and what if he wants to comment on what was found in the autopsy. And he says, quote, I wouldn't want to comment on what the autopsy revealed. So that was his quote. I wouldn't want to comment on what the autopsy revealed. Well, of course he wouldn't, because it contradicts what his narrative is in selling this book, Elvis, What Happened. He would have to say right here, this book that we put out, while it has a lot of true stories, the main narrative is fictional. That he wasn't going to die from these drugs, because he obviously died from something much worse, which was his own internal health issues. And then to go on with this story, this article, members of the extraordinarily tight-knit Presley inner circle have been in seclusion at his guarded Graceland mansion in Memphis and were unavailable for comment. So everybody but these three isn't saying a word. Now we've seen that they have said some words, that they've done some interviews, but that's because they were caught out in the public, basically. None of them have voluntarily stepped forward and said anything, other than Dr. Nick, who had to. He had to do a press conference about it. Otherwise, in Vernon, he made a call or accepted a call from WHBQ, and he did that one. But I think those were expected. Those were ones that had to be done. But none of the rest of the inner circle has come forward to break any trust at this point. That's been confined to the three who are writing the book. And then there's some discussion going on in the comments that everyone agrees that this is terrible behavior, really, and that these people ought to be ashamed of themselves. And here's where we're going to get to why they did this. It's right here in the article. It's always been available to everybody since day 2, and he died, and they had day 1, and then on day 2, this was published. So everybody in the world could have known this information. You've probably never heard it because this doesn't fit with other people's narratives. They don't want you to know these specific pieces, or they don't understand the implications of them, what they really mean, or what I think they mean. So maybe I'm reading too much into it, but let's get into it. Dunleavy initially considered the trio's tales as fodder for a 3-part series on Presley to run in the National Star, the sensationalistic weekly tabloid owned by Australian publishing magnate Rupert Murdoch. So if you don't know who Rupert Murdoch is, you're better off for it. And I'm not going to get into who Rupert is. You can feel free to look him up yourself, but he owns a lot of media and pushed out a lot of narrative and controlled what people thought through his publications. And it wasn't, he was willing to make a buck off something cheap like this. So the fact that Dunleavy, he got himself into communication, however that happened, which if we look at the timelines, and maybe we will someday, they're extremely tight for the publication of this book. So it seems very, I don't believe that this could have all happened after the event, and some of it had to be in motion before. But again, that's my opinion. This is an entertainment-only show. We're only here for entertainment and as fans to share our opinions amongst each other as we go through this source material. So to get back to the source material, Dunleavy thinks that this is only going to make a 3-part series. He has this incredible story about Elvis, and his thinking is 3-part series, which is 3 little columns. Not really very much at all. That's how small Steve's dreams are. And this is the man that these 3 guys hooked their wagon to. All right, so then it says, after talking with the men briefly, Dunleavy said, quote, "I realized we were dealing with an incredible story about the biggest star since Valentino," end quote. Well, how could you not realize that before you even talk to him? Like, that's crazy, right? But Dunleavy wakes up while he's talking to him and says, you know what? I think we got more than just 3 columns here. So then Murdoch agreed to pay the trio to tell their story. So Dunleavy has now reached out to him. He's talked to him. They said, hey, we want some money for this. Dunleavy's gone back to the top guy, or probably through his boss, and says, I can get this, but they want a lot of money, so we have to make this into more than just 3 columns for the amount of money that they want. So Murdoch agrees to pay the trio a flat fee of $50,000 for their story, and assigns Dunleavy, strictly, he said, on company time at his regular salary, to spend last September in Hollywood taping their tales. So what we've learned here is that this 300 hours all occurred in 1 month in September in Hollywood. So that would be September of 1976, which means that they had this book published in less than a year. And it wasn't written at the end of September 1976. They just had 300 hours of stuff. So somehow Steve listened to 300 hours and called out. And that would mean you had to listen to like 900 hours, because you wouldn't just listen to stuff one time, I wouldn't think, if you were doing it right. So he listened, or didn't listen, to 300 hours, called out what he wanted, then wrote it, edited it, and got it published within less than a year. And that is an incredibly short timeline. And what might be fun is to get what the normal timeline of a book would have been in the situation and compare it, but then you'll see that it's really, really short, especially at the time period. So the other thing it said here is that they assigned Dunleavy and didn't pay him anything. He just got his regular salary. Hey, Steve, go to Hollywood, spend a month in a hotel with these guys. You'll be on expense, so I'm sure he ate well, and he got to go do some entertainment and stuff. I'm sure that was part of the deal. But you're not really getting paid anything extra. So that makes Steve sound kind of dumb to me, but maybe it was still a great deal and he wanted to come to America because I believe he's from Australia. So, and he did manage to turn this into another job. So Dunleavy does this apparently for free or his regular salary, and then the others get paid $50,000. But what this says is he agrees to pay the trio a flat fee of $50,000. It doesn't say he paid each person $50,000. It says he gave the three of them $50,000, and therefore they must have split it. Now, it's not clear. So we will look at it both ways. Let's say that they got $50,000 apiece. In 2025 dollars, that's $266,000, or more than $250,000. So when they heard $50,000, they would have heard, because it would have felt like they're getting more than $250,000, either all by themselves or to split between the three of them. And I would think that if you heard today that you needed to go work for a month in a hotel with a pool and room service, and you're just going to talk the whole time, and they're going to give you $250,000, you'd probably do it, right? Or even if you had to split it three ways, you'd probably be thinking, this isn't a bad deal. I'm willing to do this. So it was, it's not like it was nothing, but compared to what I think they could have gotten for the story, if they had had a colonel or somebody who actually knew about marketing or making a deal and who had not gone to Dunleavy and somebody real, they might have been able to make substantially more money than this, because this is what Murdoch was willing to pay just for the smut. But let's say that they got the $250,000 each for the 300 hours. That comes out to about $166.67 per hour out of that 50,000. That's 50,000 divided by 300, which I find, Elvis was really into numbers, and I don't know how he felt about the number 666, but this number 166.67, it has it right there in the middle. So it seems kind of, I just happen to notice it, right? So there it is. But that's 166.67 per hour, or $886 per hour in 2025. So pretty good salary, $885 per hour for 300 hours. It's not a bad deal. But if we divide it by 3, they got $16,667 a piece, which is another one of those numbers that has 3 sixes in it. But that would be about $89,000 in today's money. So this was a significant amount, would have probably got you through a full year, right? Or in their case, the average American at their time was making somewhere around $7,000 or $8,000 a year if they were doing really good, maybe 10. So 16 was significant. You could get somewhere on 16, even if you had a family. And if you divide that out by 300 hours, that's $55.56 per hour, or $295 per hour in 2025. So again, not a bad salary for those 300 hours. And you got to be in a hotel, and they would have paid all your expenses, and you got to use whatever those facilities were. And I'm sure there was entertainment on top of that you went to. I'm sure they all 4 had a great time while they did this. So if you had already known how much they got paid, please put that in the comments. I would love to see that. Or if you didn't know, let me know that. I'd like to know that I'm providing some information that people haven't seen, and that gives you a new way to look at what these three did and why they did it and how much they got for it. But let's go on with the rest of the article. Early in the spring, Murdoch's World News Corporation signed New York literary agent Gloria Loomis to begin offering the book to publishers. Loomis brought the manuscript to 30 companies, but in the end, only Ballantine bid for what Loomis called a substantial sum. Now, what I find interesting about this part of the article is they didn't have any problem telling you how much these three guys got paid, but when it came to how much they made, how much they got paid by Ballantine to publish the book. So Murdoch's already made his investment back. He paid the $50,000. He picked up the hotel rooms. He paid Steve what he was going to pay him anyway, so it didn't really cost him anything on that one. And now he's collecting from Ballantine everything that he paid plus his profit. He's already out. And I don't know whether he's getting a profit share off it or not, but he's already profited. So he's very happy because he got a substantial sum that we're not allowed to know. But we are allowed to know what they paid to these three guys who really, really did this like amateurs. And the Colonel must have just been laughing and laughing about this because this is a comedy. It's a true comedy in what they got. Now, it hurt Elvis, so it's not a comedy there, but their ability to make this deal was... And again, I said this yesterday that I think Sonny believed that he was equal to Elvis. I believe Red thought that, and Dave thought that as well. And in their particular pieces of expertise, that might have been true. Elvis didn't write songs, but Red did. Elvis didn't necessarily have the knowledge about security that Sonny had developed. And Sonny was good at it, and he went on to do that as a living. And Elvis knew karate and was good at it, but he wasn't anywhere near as good as Dave. But none of them were as good at as Elvis at working a crowd, doing the performances, even making a deal. Like, he used to make his own deals before he got the Colonel involved and got Bob and them. He'd have to go out and talk to some people. He wasn't terrible at it. It wasn't something he liked to do. So he had the Colonel doing this for him, and the Colonel was, the greatest. And Bob wasn't bad before that, Bob Neal. So, but these guys didn't learn any lessons from those. They did see that they were incredible deal makers, but they didn't learn any of the deal making lessons. And this is where it shows up, because Rupert made a killing right before the book even got printed, and they have already spent all their money in the last year. So I believe that it was split by 3, because they're all on TV right now saying, we did this a year ago. This was all done a year ago. And basically they're kind of telling us that the money's all gone. Now they don't say that, so I may just be reading that into it, but it kind of seems like they've pretty much spent everything. Now, maybe they did get the whole $250,000 and they did spend it all in a year. That's possible too. These guys were spendy. They were used to spending. And then back to the article. Just 2 months ago, Ballantine scored another coup by publishing George Lucas's novelization of his film Star Wars, a paperback that shot to the top of all the major bestseller lists and had already sold about 2 million copies. So Ballantine knows how to print these books and get them out there and get them out in substantial numbers. And they've already printed another 250,000 of this one. And this past history with Star Wars is telling you that if they need to, they can print 2 million. That's not a problem for them. And then the president of Ballantine Books, Bush, says, quote, I didn't know whether the book was legally publishable, but we're owned by Random House, a subsidiary of RCA, which records Elvis Presley, which is a very conservative company. Our lawyers determined it was okay. Now, have any of you ever heard that before? Because that's pretty significant, right? Random House, which is a subsidiary of RCA. RCA owns them. It's not that Random House owns RCA. RCA is the boss. And Random House, through Ballantyne, comes to Random House. And then Random House goes to RCA and says, hey, we're going to print this smut book about Elvis. We know he's our number one recording guy and selling most of our records. And as we've seen in previous episodes, every record store in America is selling 1 or 2 Elvis Presley records a week. And they keep roughly 50 on hand, somewhere between 30 and 50 on hand to satisfy the monthly demand. So a lot of people are buying a lot of Elvis records all the time. RCA is making a lot of money off Elvis. They've also got the 1973, the rights to everything before 73 that they're going to reprint. And here comes one of their subsidiaries saying, hey, we got this terrible book about Elvis, but it should sell really well because it's all bad stuff. And RCA says, hey, green light, go ahead and print that thing, because that's going to bring in a whole lot of attention. It's going to bring in a lot of publicity. We basically don't even have to pay for it because we're going to make money on the book. So our subsidiary is going to make all this money. We don't have to pay a dime for any advertising for anything. And more Elvis Presley records are going to sell because the smut's not really going to hurt him. It's just going to tick off his fan base, and they're going to show their support. I don't know that was what their thinking was, but here we see that RCA said, RCA didn't tell the lawyers for Ballantyne, hey, we got a problem with this. It seems like the lawyers contacted someone and everything was okie dokie. So and this is right here in this newspaper article, everybody could have known it 2 days after Elvis passed away. It's right here. Now, you've read tons and tons of books. Nobody's ever mentioned this, right? Nobody's ever brought this up. According to the book, which the bodyguards say they will substantiate with lie detector tests, Presley was a prodigious consumer of a wide variety of drugs. He takes pills to go to sleep, bodyguard Red West is quoted as saying. And again, they've gotten this quote wrong. It's from Sonny West. He takes pills to get up. He takes pills to stop him from going to the John. So now we've changed the word from bathroom to lavatory to John. We've hit them all. We've hit every word you can hit for the bathroom. There have been times where he was so hyper on uppers that he had trouble breathing. And on one occasion, he thought he was going to die. He was a walking pharmaceutical shop. So that's interesting, too. On one occasion, he thought he was going to die. So nobody else thought he was going to die. Just Elvis thought he was going to die. So they were kind of making fun of him at this point. Hey, he's so high, he thinks he's going to die. But they weren't concerned that he was. That wasn't a concern that's being stated here. And they go on with this article, was convinced that he had extraordinary religious powers. Presley, the book alleges, quote, firmly believes he has the powers of psychic healing by the laying on of hands. He believes he will be reincarnated. He believes he has strength of will to move clouds in the air. He firmly believes he is a prophet who was destined to lead, designated by God for a special role in his life. So, was he not designated for a special role in his life? I mean, I think we could all agree that whatever being we may individually believe or not believe in, Elvis certainly had a special role. Some might call it fate or destiny. Some might say God placed him there, but there was a special role. Now, was he a prophet who was destined to lead? Well, he was putting out messages, and people were listening to those messages, and he understood that people were listening to them, and it became a responsibility in the late 50s, in his early career. Those songs, I don't think, meant as much to him. They meant a lot to what his emotions were feeling at the time, and they connected to all the other teenagers' emotions at the time. He was telling us all how a teenager feels. But as he grew up, he began to tell us how a man feels, how an adult feels, how a father feels, how a husband feels, how a lover of age feels. So people heard that, and they heard messages in it, and they took things from his songs, and some of them saw lessons for their future. And people would call that a prophet. So did he believe he was a prophet? I don't know. But I believe there were a lot of people that were around him telling him he was a prophet. I mean, that's definitely true. And they were treating him as if he was a prophet. And those are a lot of the people at the gates. I mean, they were there all the time, witnessing. You know, they were there to witness Elvis Presley, to see what he was doing, because they believed that he brought meaning to their lives. But Sonny tries to pretend here that that's some kind of craziness, some kind of eccentricity, but that's actually what the entire fan base is built on. And then to get over here into the comments, which I've neglected for a little bit, Marion saying that some of them use the fear of getting fired as an accusation not to talk to him. And that Angel saying that speaks to the person's character, and some agreement there. And Regina's saying in Marion that they did not know any of this. So thank you guys for letting me know that, because I believe this is important information. And I think maybe it's changed the way you see things about these guys, or maybe it's strengthened your opinions of whatever they were. But it's real information, and it was there, and nobody really focuses on it. And Mary's saying that you can't believe, this is unbelievable, but that the money can buy everything. And Angel saying this is wild, it's great research, never heard this, and you've been doing this for a long time. So I appreciate hearing that, Angel. And that he sure did, God-given, he was constantly moving towards the light. So let's get back to this article. I want to definitely get it done today. They're also saying that he had a pathological obsession with uniforms and badges of authority, and he was fascinated with pistols, rockets, rifles, and other weapons. And that sounds like a lot of men I know. And the uniforms and badges, like, who doesn't like some uniforms and badges? And Elvis was able to use these uniforms and badges to connect with policemen. He had an intense interest in police. He had an intense interest in the military. And it's not that his interest was in the organizations themselves, but in the people of those organizations. And when he was a teenager, he used to talk to the policemen in Memphis. And that's how he really got to know some of them, is before he was ever famous. They knew Elvis Presley, those that walked the beat in the neighborhood and stuff. And he respected policemen. He respected what they did for a living. He respected anyone who volunteered or answered the call, the draft, to serve in the military. He was very proud of his own service, and he was a deputy policeman. So, yeah, he liked these weapons. He liked the badges, and he liked to connect on a one-on-one level with each of these police guys. And he hired a bunch of them, including Sam Thompson and Dick Grove. And then, quote, Elvis is never without a gun, says Sonny. Mostly he carries 2 or even 3 on him. Even when he is on stage, he carries a tiny 4-shot Derringer in the top of his boot. Now, as we read in a previous episode from an article in a 1963 photo shoot magazine, Elvis had death threats since day one. He'd been dealing with death threats since he started his career. People were always threatening to kill him or beat him up. And we have now passed the point where JFK has been assassinated, RFK has been assassinated, MLK has been assassinated. Charles Manson's gang has killed a lot of people. that Elvis knew. And the 70s have continued to get crazier with acts of terrorism and stuff. So, yes, Elvis got to the point that he was carrying a lot of guns and he was paranoid. But it's not because he shouldn't be paranoid. It's because there were people that were constantly threatening to do something to him. Once, Elvis ordered Red West to kill Mike Stone, the karate instructor who Presley held responsible for the disintegration of his marriage, and frequently would shoot holes in televisions when program displeased him. I can't tell you how many television sets went to their death at the hands of Elvis and his shooting, Red West says. He would shoot out television sets in hotel rooms and in any one of the houses he has. So again, I think it was Sonny who said that, but he did do those things, yes. And that he enjoyed regular fireworks nights in which he would set off a variety of explosive devices, and once deliberately set out to destroy, with a specially hired construction bulldozer, a home he had bought. So that was a home that was out behind his house, out behind Graceland. And Travis Smith and Billy Smith used to live in that house when Billy was young. And then Travis had gotten another house, they moved out. But some of his family had lived in that house at one point, but it was sitting empty. But Vernon had a whole bunch of stuff in it. And so they tell a little bit of the story here. Elvis starts up the bulldozer and yells out to Vernon, "You better move, Daddy." And Vernon asks why, and Elvis says, "Because I'm going to knock the damn house down." And Vernon runs in and starts grabbing things like lamps and stuff and running back out with him saying, "Hold on, son, hold on. I still got more stuff in here." And then Elvis tries to drive this bulldozer through the house. Now, what it says here is that in less than an hour, we'd knocked down the whole superstructure to where it drops right into the basement and it's burning up a storm. So what they left out here is that the bulldozer that Elvis uses is too small. So he can't knock the house down. He just kind of ramps into it and he gets irritated about it, but he calls and rents a much bigger bulldozer. So they bring the second bulldozer and he gets on it and Red's on the smaller one. And they start having like a bumper car wars where they're not actually hitting each other, but they're hitting the house. And they knock this thing down into its basement, like he's saying, and then they set it on fire and burn it up. But he did that so that he could have more room to run the horses. So this house was in the way of the horses, and I think he must have told people that he needed the house gone, or he wanted this open field, and nobody listened well enough, and he just decided, hey, I'm going to do it myself. And he had somebody call and get that first bulldozer brought in, and when it didn't work, he moved on to the step 2, and he made sure it got done. And then they're saying that they made a special trip to Washington during the Nixon administration to get the drug enforcement badge, which that's a famous story that we all know. So that's in the book, of course, because Sonny was there and Sonny couldn't possibly leave that story out. I mean, even Steve Dunleavy couldn't leave that story out. That's got the President of the United States in it. Steve Dunleavy said that the Ballantine lawyers tamed the tone of the book somewhat. He said, quote, "They put some restrictions on us. They made us corroborate a lot of the allegations with independent backup, just as if we were doing a news story. They made us take out about 10% of the book. It was tasteless, but actually very accurate. A lot of it was crazy drug and sex stuff." So I find this a hilarious quote because Steve is saying, I handed in the script, and the lawyers at Ballantine looked at it and said, "Whoa, do you have any actual evidence that Elvis did any of these things that you've written?" And Steve says, "Well, no, I just got it all from them." And the lawyers say, "Well, we listened to the tapes, and that's not really what they said. You kind of ramp this up a little bit." And Steve's going, "Well, You mean the tasteless part? Because that's the part he put in, right? The 10% of the book that gets cut out, that's the pure Steve part. The totally tasteless, made up part that he says was very accurate. It was very accurate, but the lawyer said it can't be in there because it's not true, because nobody else corroborates it. Almost like we were doing a news story. So this journalist who's writing this book, he's very surprised that people think that he needs to follow the same standards as a news story. So I don't know if you guys think that's hilarious, but I find it hilarious. And then he still gets in there that it was about crazy drug and sex stuff. Okay, but not true crazy drug and sex stuff, or at least nothing that you could actually prove or get anyone else to agree was true. And then this says that Presley's unexpected death also triggered action at other New York publishing houses. Pocketbooks, which several years ago published May Mann's Elvis and the Colonel, which was an account of Presley's relationship with Colonel Tom Parker, announced that it was planning to send the book back to press, but in an altered form. So Pocketbooks looks at Ballantine Books and says, hey, they can't be the only ones with fresh product on the shelves for Elvis. We got to get something out there too, because they're sucking up all the sales and they're getting all the free. You don't have to do any marketing during this event because the newspapers and the televisions are full of it. And that's driving people to the bookstores, just like the record stores. You just have to put the product on the shelf. So they're going to slap like a new intro or something and a new cover on this book and throw it out there. And then according to Mary Hall of Pickett Books, a division of Simon & Schuster, the New York Times reporter Molly Ivins, who wrote the paper's obituary for Elvis, has been contracted to update the Man book, which will be retitled The Private Elvis. So now they're going all out. They're not only putting a new cover on this book, they're going to put a new person's name on it to kind of make it look like maybe somebody else, this is a new book. If you had that Man book, maybe this is different. Maybe you should go ahead and pick it up. And because it's got a different title, different cover, and a little bit of different something in it, new intro or something. And then Pocketbooks has already received 250,000 orders for the book. And copies should be at bookstores in just a matter of days. So they've started up their presses too. And just like Ballantine, they're going to have stuff in the store by the weekends. And amazingly, it's the exact same number as Ballantine, 250,000 copies. So it seems like in a 5-ish day period, you could print and ship 250,000 books if you have a printing press. If you've got experience in the printing press, this is not an issue. Howard Kaminsky, president of Warner Books, said that his firm yesterday received, quote, the largest one-day order for any title in our history for Jerry Hopkins' widely praised biography of Presley titled Elvis. Now, this was a decent book, and I've done a review of that on my channel. I do like Jerry's book. It really gives you a view of what a fan would have known at the time Jerry wrote the book, which was like 6 years earlier. So it's not a view of Elvis at the time of his passing, but it was a good fan view of what they saw in 1970-71. And it says over 260,000 copies of that book were ordered by wholesalers across the country. And Waters was rushing to meet the unprecedented demand. So again, right at the 250,000 copies number. Seems to be a very popular number for printing of these books. And that brings us to the end of what I have prepped for today. In the next episode, we will look again outside the timeline a little bit. I had posted a link before to a Sonny article, an interview from 2007. I'm going to go ahead and post that again here. I'm going to go over a few of the quotes from this in the next episode so that we can close out the circle of what they did and kind of where they got to, at least from the point of view of Sonny. And then we'll circle back into August 17th itself. We'll be reading some more articles. Joyce is going to get some more information. Friends are going to show up with more evidence that's coming through the Elvis fan channels, our fictional Elvis fan channels that are bringing us information from today, but that could conceivably have been known back in the day. I found some really interesting stuff to show you guys that all connect into this story. Not the Elvis What Happened story, but the mystery of August 16th, 1977. So I look forward to talking to you guys again soon, and I appreciate everybody who came. And thank you, Regina, so much. She's telling me thank you again, and that's very interesting. I really appreciate hearing that from you guys, so that I know that I'm bringing you content that is new and fresh to you, even though it's been out there a long time, and now we can all remember it and apply it to all these other books that we've read. You know, I'm never saying that you shouldn't read the books. They've got a lot of great information, great stories. They've got very specific perspectives in them. And you get an idea of what it was like to maybe be Elvis's friend, or to be his family member, or to be a fan from the time. And that's important too. But what we're doing here is getting down to source material, so that we don't have any reflections built on top of it. So that then when you look back at these books, you can say, oh, I see what he's talking about and why he might believe this. So hopefully that's coming through. And Marion saying, thanks a lot. Thank you, Marion, for being here. And I'm going to tell everybody, like I do at the end of every episode, till I see you again, you guys all keep on taking care of business.